Welcome. You know, sometimes a single decision, like canceling a contract, can send ripples across the entire globe. What looks like a simple regional dispute might actually be a sign that the world we've known is, well, it's changing and fast. Today, we're going to piece together a story of a massive power shift, and it all starts with one country's incredibly bold move.
So what kicks this whole thing off? It's a single, decisive action by Mexico's president. He unilaterally canceled 47 oil exploration contracts held by American companies. Just like that. This move basically handed exclusive control of the Gulf of Mexico's economic zone right back to Pemex, Mexico's state-owned oil company, for the first time in generations.
And get this, the amount of money at stake here is just immense. We're not talking about small potatoes. The sources we're looking at estimate the potential value of the oil in those canceled contracts at a staggering $276 billion. That's the value that, up until this moment, was effectively under the control of foreign corporations.
And to really get the direct financial hit, think about it like this. American companies had already invested about $23 billion. So that difference, $253 billion, that represents what one source is calling the largest net wealth transfer in Mexico's entire modern history. It's a direct flow from foreign corporate accounts back to Mexican national control.
So you have to ask, how did we get here? This first part is all about digging into how this dramatic move wasn't just some out-of-the-blue decision. The sources we've reviewed frame this as a direct clapback to a really long, really complicated history of American influence and, as they put it, control over Mexico's energy.
This timeline really lays out what the sources describe as a pattern stretching back nearly a century. They argue this was never a partnership of equals. The story they tell points to a series of control tactics. It starts with the conditions of the bailout during the 1995 peso crisis, which forced privatization. Then, they point to alleged tech sabotage in 2008, followed by price manipulation schemes that cost Mexico billions. And finally, they talk about using arbitration clauses in trade deals for what one source flat out calls legal theft.
Okay, this is where the story gets so much bigger. We're zooming way out from just this oil dispute to look at the whole historical power dynamic between the US and Mexico. And the argument is that this relationship has been completely flipped on its head. The entire argument is really captured in this one stark comparison. Think about 1848, during the Mexican-American War. The US was this nation of overwhelming military strength, driven by manifest destiny, this belief that it was their God-given right to expand, and they forced a treaty on a defeated Mexico. Now contrast that with the picture of America today painted by these sources. A nation with $35 trillion in debt, deep political divides at home, and a crucial economic dependence on its southern neighbor.
And that brings us to the crucial point. As one source just puts it bluntly, the relationship has totally inverted. It is no longer a hegemon, a dominant power, and a subordinate. No, this is now the relationship between a debtor and a creditor. The entire foundation of power has flipped.
And this leads to a really provocative, almost unthinkable question that one of our sources poses. With all this new leverage, could Mexico actually make a strategic, legal challenge to the 170-year-old border itself? The argument is that what once seemed totally permanent could all of a sudden be up for negotiation.
Now, why is this even on the table? Well, the sources list some very specific American vulnerabilities that they claim would stop the US from pushing back effectively. They point to the deep political fractures we see every day, the worst military recruitment crisis in half a century, and a critical dependency on Mexican supply chains that could literally paralyze American industry overnight.
All right, let's zoom out even further now. Because the sources are crystal clear on this point, what Mexico is doing is not happening in a vacuum. It's a symptom, a really powerful one, of a much larger global shift, the rise of a new global power that has completely changed the rules of the game.
This one sentence is the core argument of our third source. The unipolar moment, that short window after the Cold War when the US was the undisputed sole superpower on the planet, it's done. Finished. The global system the US built was never designed to handle a real peer competitor, but that's exactly what has shown up.
And what's the foundation of that power shift? According to one analyst, it's industrial capacity. I mean, just look at this chart. It visualizes their claim that China has built an industrial base 5 times larger than America's. This isn't just a small gap. This is what they describe as a fundamental structural advantage.
So what does all that industrial power actually mean in the real world?
Well, it creates an economic center of gravity. As this shows, China is now the biggest trading partner for most countries. It dominates critical supply chains and leads in high-tech exports. This creates a kind of gravitational pull that gives countries like Mexico another option, an alternative to the American-led system.
Okay, so let's connect this big global theory right back to our story in Mexico. This table is absolutely fascinating. It shows exactly how China and its partners in the BRICS alliance, that's Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, gave Mexico the exact tools it needed. When the US tried to use its tech monopoly as leverage, China offered more advanced drilling tech. When financial pressure was applied, BRICS banks offered loans. This is how that old dependency was broken, piece by piece. So what do we even call this new reality? Well, the sources define it as a multipolar world. It's a system where power isn't just in one place anymore, it's spread out among multiple major countries. And what does that mean? More competition, more rivalry, and according to this analysis, more instability. So in our final section, let's bring all this high-level geopolitical talk right back down to earth. What are the actual, tangible consequences of this global shift for everyday people, for you and me?
So what are the economic ripples here? While for Mexico, having national control over its oil could mean cutting out those foreign corporate profit margins, which could lead to lower gas prices for its own citizens. But for Americans, the sources suggest that losing access to that discounted heavy crude from Mexico could mean higher diesel prices. And since almost everything is moved by truck, that could ripple through the whole supply chain and show up as higher prices for things like groceries.
So what are the big takeaways? What are the defining features of this new era we're stepping into, seen through the lens of this whole Mexico situation? Well, the sources point to a few key things. Major energy deals are starting to bypass the US dollar. You're seeing the rise of regional alliances that are independent of the US. Even longtime US allies are starting to play both sides. And international law is now being used as a tool to challenge historical conquests.
And in the end, the analysis from all these sources really boils down to this one quote. The core argument is that these huge shifts aren't driven by ideologies, good guys versus bad guys. They're driven by the raw, structural realities of power. When the distribution of power changes, the world changes with it. Simple as that.
And that leaves us with the final central question. The unipolar moment is over, according to these sources. But what comes next? Does a world with multiple centers of power lead to more balance and prosperity for everyone? Or does it just open the door to more conflict and more danger? That right there is the defining tension of the new era we are all just beginning to navigate.